Hi, everyone. Today we're talking about The Knitting Way, a guide to spiritual self-discovery by Linda Sklonik and Janice McDaniels. I'm here with Linda Jennings from Color Storms Yarn, and she's going to share our knitting tip today.
Okay, my knitting tip today, I'm going to take my phone, we're on my phone, and we're going to go on a little journey.
I love it.
So many people buy yarn for their stash or for their collection or for a future project, and they put it in a safe box and store it away. I elect to see it as artwork. And so I hang a lot of my collection. So I'm going to show it to you in case it inspires you to do some of the same.
I love it.
So I'll turn my phone around here. Here's part of my first collection. I paired this beautiful lace yarn with this picture, picking up on the colors of the painting for that little spot on the wall. And then over here, you can see I have a big assortment of things that I've just hung up together on my wall. That's not particularly, well, there's a little artwork there I really like pairing flat artwork with three-dimensional things. A lot of people have done that in different ways. And here's another one. I paired this beautiful like DK yarn from Switzerland with some family pictures.
Wow.
And then in my bird room, I did at one time buy these baskets to hang on the wall to hang yarn out of. So I've got those two there and those two there. And again, they're kind of paired with some other things on my wall. So the joy with that is it inspires me often to see the yarn, especially if the yarn was bought just because I loved it and I don't really know what I'm going to do with it yet. Then I just leave it on the wall until I get the right idea of what to do with it. Or sometimes I will find a surprising combination that I wouldn't have thought of if the yarn wasn't out there. So I do have a lot of my collection in drawers now. I stopped keeping all of it on the wall, but I still really enjoy having some of it up on the wall. And so that's my tip for today, in case that's something that interests you.
I love that. It's really interesting to me how you were able to put the yarn colors with the colors of the images and paintings. For me personally, that's really difficult to pick out colors of an image. And I feel like you really nailed it with your yarn and the colors of the art.
Well, thank you.
So good. So this week's chapter is the last chapter of the book, chapter 9, and it's titled Paying It Forward. Passing on the knitting and the wisdom. So this chapter really spoke to me because I feel like it's not, knitting to me is not even an oral tradition. It's a passed down tradition where we show each other how to do it. And while it's possible to read a book and teach yourself, there's richness in that shared community of having a mentor and learning from someone else.
Yeah, you have a strong tradition of that in your family, right? Your grandmother and your mother?
I mean, when I think about all the women in my family, everybody knows how to knit and crochet. So yeah, I'd say that's strong. They might not actively do it, but everybody knows how.
That's so cool. That's so cool. So I agree. It's just wonderful knitting with someone and learning tips from someone. I think my mom first taught me how to knit and crochet but I didn't do it very much as a young person. I had to reteach myself with a book.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a long, long time to find my knitting community, but I'm so glad I finally did.
Yeah. The things that I think about are, we come back to knitting and tragedy is what I found. And I can only say that because I've witnessed it so often when there is external stress and we're finding that we need something to do just for ourselves or to pass the time. And if it wasn't something that I observed a lot, I wouldn't just make that broad generalization, but it's a definite common thread when people come back to the fiber arts that they've gone through a big life change.
Sometimes that's what brings people to knitting, is a big life change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that it's very common that we learn as kids, whether we're doing finger knitting or crochet or however we experience the learning process, and then we come back to it later in life.
What are your earliest memories of teaching someone to knit?
Something a story that I like to tell is that even though it's been passed down from, sometimes knitters I talk to have a grandmother story. And while we all love, love, love our grandparents, sometimes they're not the best teachers. And, there can be like this frustration on their part, on our part. Maybe we're not ready to learn the wisdom that they want to share with us when we're younger. And sometimes having an outside teacher can take away some of that frustration or stress. And when I'm teaching, I want to be super careful for me that I'm not imparting that sense of bitterness into the craft, and to help ease the knitter or the crocheter into a gentle learning experience, because I want to create the conditions for success.
Yes. That's good thoughts. I taught all three of my daughters, but I think for some of them, for a mother teaching a daughter, there's a little bit of the sense of, well, that's her thing. I want to have my own thing. Right. And she's so good at it. Why should I knit? I'm not very good. So there can be both of those things.
It's a paradox.
My first daughter had knit some in middle school and high school, and then kind of took it on for herself in college and as a young adult. My other two daughters both knit a little bit, which is kind of fun. Every once in a while they'll see a project they want to do and go ahead and knit something. My youngest daughter, Bethany, has tried crochet a couple times because she likes to knit those horse fly masks and or the ear bonnets, and she's learned to knit those by hand. So it's kind of fun that they do still knit a little bit, but I think especially for the other two daughters, it's very much mommy's thing, and it's maybe not that cool, so it's nice if you learn from somebody else, either because A, you really want to, it's become your thing now, or B, somebody who you think is really cool is knitting. And so you want to do it because it's appealing in that way now.
Yeah, I was reading a meme on like a Tumblr screenshot or something, and someone said that on your apocalyptic surviving the zombie team, you should definitely have a sewist, a knitter, a crocheter, a weaver, someone who can help create textiles. It made me giggle. But
Yeah.
yes, this is a life skill that it's good to have, and whether you use it every day or not, it will always be there if you need it.
Yeah. Yeah. And Bethany has really taken to sewing. So I'm really glad. And Rebecca some too. So yeah, a life
It's so
skill.
good.
I can remember asking both of them at some point, it used to be that hobbies were very much connected to real life, like coin
Mm,
collecting, stamp collecting, things like that. But then at some point, hobbies became things that have nothing to do with real life, like Pokemon cards and video
mm.
games. And I remember telling um, my children, I really want each of you to just learn some life skill, learn to cook or sew or collect rocks and learn about rocks or something, so that you have an interest that has to do with the real world.
I think that you're touching on something that, as computers have become larger parts of our lives, there's something tangible that's lost. I'm not saying that you're wasting your time if you're playing video games. I'm saying that the act of using your hands to create something tangible is not usually a video game result. And so
Mhm.
there's just something different about that. And I don't know.
Now what's happened is because so much of their lives, of our adult children, so much of their lives is wrapped around the computer, that they
Yeah.
come home, they don't want anything to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been this huge explosion of actual physical board games and other
Mm-hmm.
hobbies, really, that have nothing to do with the computer. So really, in the end, they figured it out, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the human condition is to create. So I think it's a wonderful thing. Yeah. And that knitting can fit into a life, or a 360-degree life experience. It doesn't have to be, to me, once you know how to knit, you're in the club, and that's a lifetime membership. So even if you're not actively working on a project right now, you're still a knitter because you've learned how. And so, casual
Yeah, she
knitters
talks about
welcome.
that. Yeah, she talks about that on page 189. She said something, she's like, she said, perhaps, let's see, she's talking about her sons and how she had all sons, and she taught each one of them to learn to knit. And she said, number 3 son called his little project a neck warmer. But they're all 3 of them, their knitting careers were short-lived. Perhaps it was just too outside the gender lines for them, or maybe it was too hard for these active kids to sit still for very long. But in any case, none of them took to it. But I can say that they do know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I can say that they have an appreciation for what it is and what it is to me. And on occasion, they actually brag to their friends about their mom's work. And maybe one day when they are very old men, they will say to their grandchildren, my mother taught me how to knit. Right? So
that's a lovely sentiment to end today on. I just love that.
Well, thank you for joining us today on The Knitting Way, as we're finishing up this book. We're probably going to finish it next week, right?
I think we're on track.
Talk about The Knitting Way by Linda Skolnick and Janice McDaniels. Have a wonderful week, everyone.